All right, let's do this. So, hello everyone. My name is Everclear. I'm a life coach for gamers. And a lot of you watching this right now maybe know me as the Merchant Elder on a game called Nexus. But that's not something I really want to talk about today, because today I want to talk about an issue that I think is really important in the gaming community and is not really being served or talked about enough. And that's trauma. And it's not something maybe as fun as talking about video games or me just streaming playing New World or something like that, but the reason that I want to talk about it is that I know how many of you want to talk about it. Because over the past year or so, I've had the privilege to talk to many people and discuss a little bit about my story and what I do and how I help people, and immediately people's ears perk up. They are asking me, what do you know about this? Telling me their stories, sometimes some really awful stuff, and I think we really, I think there's a void in the gaming community where this is being talked about and addressed, and I don't think people are really tackling it the way that I want to tackle it and with some of the things that I want to say about it. So I hope you enjoy and get something out of this. Hopefully, my goal here is to kind of talk about what it is a little bit, my own experiences, why it really matters, and then maybe at the end some practical tips that people can take away from this, right from day one. With that said, it is super important that I be very clear right off the bat. I am not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist. I do not play one on the internet. I am a coach, and there's a difference there. What I cannot help with is stuff like bipolar disorders, dissociative identity disorders, things that are real mental illness. That is not something that I'm qualified to handle. If you need help like that, please seek out a licensed trained therapist, doctor, whatever. Also, if you're currently in some kind of crisis, and again, I talk to a lot of people about this. I know some people have things from the past, but then there are also some people actually going through some stuff right now. If you are ever really in a position where you're thinking about hurting yourself or harming yourself, there is a link in the About section of this stream, as well as on my actual website that will show you all the crisis hotline numbers, whether it's like suicide hotline, physical abuse hotline, anything like that for you to call and get some help. Please do that. That's not something that I can really help or address on this stream. With that all out of the way, what I can help with is helping to uncover what trauma is, see how it affects us, learn how to kind of handle it and deal with it, and resolve it. And it's really kind of about changing our stories and our beliefs and things like that in relation to a lot of the things that have happened to us, and just kind of processing things, and forgiveness and things like that. And those things are well within what I do, my own experiences over the past decade and a half of moving through work like this and much other self-development, working with many therapists as well as coaches myself, and even being mentored by a master coach and training under them as I've gone down this direction. So we can talk about that stuff, and we can talk about things like achieving goals and whatnot, which would be maybe another day. But today I really want to focus on trauma, because I think that this is at the root of what a lot of people are struggling with. It's funny because, actually, trauma's not really funny, but it's interesting because we understand on some level that the things that have happened to us in the past somehow connect and affect us in the present, right? So maybe if you had a bad experience as a child, you recognize that it, you know, messes with you or causes you to have certain fears or things like that, intrusive thoughts, things that like really weigh us down. And you know, there might be just a ton of little things like that in our lives, or there could be like some really big traumatic events that have happened in our lives, some like really horrific shit. But for some reason, then the way we kind of tackle it nowadays is we look to almost use like tricks or band-aids and things like that. And I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. You know, if you are really, you know, nowadays when people go to therapy, one of the big things is CBT. And it certainly has its place. I think it's a useful tool. And it's one of those things, though, that, you know, you hear a lot of websites, if you search CBT, they're like, well, this is, you know, scientifically proven to be effective. But if you actually look at the data, what it's actually doing is they're saying, okay, someone has these symptoms. Maybe they're depressed, they have intrusive thoughts, you know, whatever else. And we're just giving them like tools and tactics to kind of help with that. But that stuff's always still there, right? And it might just be because of how we're going in our society where, especially with insurance, they're just trying to get people in and out through whatever we can do. As far as, you know, instead of actually really going deep with a person, you know, who is hurting, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, whether it's, you know, a doctor actually looking at you because you have a physical ailment or a therapist, we're kind of looking at it like, well, this is a solution because they say that their symptoms are better. And in 6 to 10 weeks, we can teach people these techniques. They are reporting that what's going on is not affecting them as much, and they can get through life. So then they get back out there and they just continue struggling. To me, this is kind of ineffective overall because, again, if you think about the way that trauma and grief and everything can really weigh us down, it's like having this really heavy pack on your back like all the time. You just are struggling through life. Everything seems harder. You're constantly fighting with yourself. It's such a pain, right? And really, if you take some of these methodologies, techniques, whatever, it's like maybe removing some of the weight out of the pack. So it's like, okay, well, it's a little better now. It's a little easier. Yeah, it used to be 100 pounds. Now it's 65 pounds. You're still hauling around 65 pounds. And I think also in the worst moments, your fears and everything still rear their ugly heads. You know, it may be a little easier to get by day to day, but then something big comes along and you're usually set back, and I don't think those techniques really help. I think it's fair to say that as a society, we're interested in managing symptoms. I think, and this is not advice to stop taking pills or anything like that. I think pharmaceuticals certainly have their use. And please do not stop doing anything just because of what you hear on this stream without consulting your doctor. But, you know, I think there could be something to be said that pharmaceuticals are interested in people staying on pills long term as a solution and just managing symptoms rather than really doing the hard work of getting really deep and at the root of what these problems are. It's, again, my opinion that the vast majority of issues are born out of trauma, grief, the shame that comes from that, all those kinds of things. I can say that personally. I think there's a good amount of literature out there that supports this. And I don't want to just say that it's my opinion that this is really an epidemic. I know when I first started working with my coach and mentor, she described it that way. And also there is a man by the name of Dr. Paul Conti. He just released a book on this called Trauma, the Invisible Epidemic. And, you know, I haven't had the chance to read the book yet. It only came out in the past month or so. But I have listened to him speak about this, and even he was stating the way we treat trauma is abysmal. There's maybe a few centers around the U.S. or the world that do a decent job of handling this, but it's not being addressed in the proper ways, and even what he was saying is in line with what I'm talking about here. So it's not like I'm just coming up with shit off the top of my head. Where I'm drawing this from is a lot of literature, a lot of professional reports, opinions, statistics, all that kind of stuff. So again, going back, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be dealing with the symptoms when you could really get at the root. If you think about it like a tree, right? At the root of a lot of these problems is your traumas, your griefs, the things that you went through, and those inform your beliefs. Those beliefs then inform thoughts, and then thoughts inform actions, and that's actually going back to CBT. It's a little bit of that, but really it's like, if you want your actions to change, what CBT is saying is, well, address your thoughts. Like, you have these thoughts, so then here are counter thoughts you can think about to solve that. But I'm saying, if you really get down and address the root issues and process trauma and grief, that will then work on changing your beliefs, because that's actually part of the work, right? When you're trying to get past trauma. And then naturally, once your beliefs change, your thoughts change and your actions change. Now, I don't want to suggest that you will never have fears or anxieties or anything like that. Even before this first stream, I was like, okay, I need to take a few deep breaths, because it's the first time I'm doing this, and I'm going to be talking to people and talking about some heavy shit, if we're being really honest. But it's a totally different life than where I was in the past. It's a totally different method of operating than in the past, when I was always being dragged down by this stuff. So I hope that what people begin to take away from this, at least, is that if you've been struggling for a really long time, if you've been feeling like you maybe make a little bit of progress, but you're not really seeing the progress you'd like, you're not really living the life you'd like, typically speaking, it's because you're not going deep enough. There are a few really good therapists out there, especially some more old school ones, who are willing to go really deep with people, look at the big topics, get in the real shit, right? But too often, I've been to a number of therapists over the years. I think out of the 6 or 7 I've been to and have worked with for a few months to a year or more at various times in my life, there was one who I thought really was addressing things at a deeper level, that was really providing solutions, really, figuring this out. I've been to 100 therapists. I'm really sorry to hear that, Teddy Adventures. Hopefully you get something out of what I'm saying here. So, how do we address this with trauma? There are systems, right? This is not something that it's like, oh, I just need to talk about this. I think a lot of times, aside from techniques that are taught in therapy, you're kind of talking in circles. It's like you're talking about these things, but you're not actually doing the work to address it and process it in a different way, gain new lessons from it, gain new beliefs, all that kind of stuff. The actual work is a little bit beyond what I want to talk about on this particular stream. I do want to get into that in other streams, and also, if anyone wants to contact me about that, directly or privately, especially because we're talking about some big things, I'm totally open to discussing it, giving some tips, or even, getting on a call, because again, this is what I do. So if you want to reach out and talk about that, we can certainly do that. But I don't want to go down that path, because I really want to focus on the topic rather than pitch myself. Now, let's see. That's when shadow work comes into play. Damaging, but worth it in the end. Tons of healing. Yes, I agree, Ms. Bits. Shadow work is something that I am really interested in. I will briefly touch upon this. I think that Jungian techniques or ideas are dismissed a little too quickly in society nowadays. Again, I think people go, oh, well, that was from forever ago. And now we know things like CBT, works really well, and we have scientific data that shows this. If you're interested in this kind of thing, and someone just said I've never heard of shadow work, it's a little bit outside of what I want to talk about on this one. That might be something that I address further, but that's something that I have actually delved into and gotten a lot of benefit out of. Not just actual shadow work, but really what a few other ideas and techniques that Carl Jung talked about in the past as well. So, where do I want to go with this at this point? I think I really want to continue to... Well, let's actually shift over. Now, I'm going to let people talk in the chat if they want to, if you guys have things to say, if you have questions at this point. I'm going to try to answer that as this is going on. But for now, I really want to tell people that if you've been struggling, there's more than just hope, right? I think through my own experience with trauma and grief, and I'll get into that a little bit, it was a journey for me of 10 to 15 years, and I've done just about everything you can imagine, whether it was therapy, coaching, CBT, mindfulness, meditation, NLP, etc. And so it's been a long journey of figuring this all out and literally trying everything and bumping into every wall and whatnot to see what works, and I'm hoping to kind of distill that down. And I think at various times it felt like, when is this ever going to end? Right? And I can totally empathize, and I know that a lot of people are struggling, and they've been struggling for years, and it's not just that they're struggling because it's now, it's stuff that happened when they were children. But there's more than hope. There are actually ways to solve this, and there are ways to get better, and not only that, it's worth it. The thing is, it is going to require some really deep work that can be painful at times, and it requires you taking responsibility for it. Now, I want to be super, super clear on what I just said. I am not suggesting that it's someone's fault if they were raped as a child. Let's say you were 4 years old and your uncle molested you. That's not your fault. It's not your fault. That's not what I'm saying. Similar to if you were driving your car and you came to a stoplight and you stopped and you did what you were supposed to do, and then someone comes behind and rear ends you. That's not your fault. It is now your responsibility to deal with on some level. Okay? It is now your job to get in touch with the insurance company. It is now your job to go to the repair shop and take your car there so that they can work on it, and you have to drive around a rental car for a little bit. What I am suggesting here is not that anyone has... that people are not victims, right? What I am suggesting is that despite being victimized, you have to recognize that it is on you to get out of that, to do the work to move past that and move to survivor and hopefully thriver. Okay? So if you're up for it, I strongly recommend it, because I think that life can be so much better and more beautiful than when we are trapped in trauma, when we're just escaping to games, when we're not, when we're seeing life through such a negative lens, right? I'll get into my own experiences with this. Since the time I was about 5 years old, I've struggled with something in some way or another. My dad was alcoholic. There was a point that he was abusive, not regularly, but I did certainly witness stuff. My parents got divorced. I was then sharing a room in the basement of my grandparents' condo with my mom for a few years and she was working 2 jobs while putting herself through night school to try to get her life on track and take care of me. And I was kind of raised by my grandparents then, and that kicked off a series of many different things aside from the family issues. Moving around a lot, just kind of being introverted in the first place, and a lot of little things that maybe all added up. And I really want to make an important point here. It really doesn't matter what your trauma was, although I think we can certainly say that some trauma is bigger than others. But you're still in pain, and that's still valid. So if you're the kind of person who's like, no, it wasn't that big of a deal because, well, at least I wasn't beaten by my parents or something like that, that doesn't really matter, to be honest. You're still in pain, and you're still worthy of that pain being healed and moving on and forward in life, happy and feeling worthy and worth love and all of that kind of stuff. So, regardless of what may have happened to you and the bigness of it, there's certainly things that other people have gone through that I've talked to them about that I would qualify as bigger than the things that I went through. But that's okay. It's still okay for me to acknowledge that I went through things that fucked me up, and it's the same for them. It's not a competition. It's not like the person who has the most trauma in the world wins and the rest of us just have to keep suffering. So please get out of that mindset, because I often hear it. As time went on, it was almost like death by 1,000 cuts. And this led me to a point where I was in toxic relationships, lopsided friendships, just really feeling no value, no worth, and I was escaping to online games. And I think that I think it's fair to say that a lot of gamers do this, and I think it's fair to say that because I talk to a lot of you, and as soon as 9 out of 10 times when I start talking about this to people in a game, they want to know more. They want to talk about it. They want to share. They want to know if I have some information, some ideas, some tips, whatever else. But it led me to a point where I was escaping. I was trying to... I was hiding behind the monitor. I was really only showing people what I wanted them to see. In these games, I was building up a persona because I wanted that to be real rather than my real life, which really sucked. And by falling into that, especially with games, right? I think people can certainly use alcohol or drugs or TV or sex or whatever else. But the interesting thing about games, especially something like an MMO, is you're creating a character, and generally it's kind of like an ideal that you'd like to be. And so you can live out this ideal to escape how shitty your real life is, right? And that's something that I'm actually interested in talking about on a future video. Especially things like archetypes and what we might be able to learn from the characters that we create and how that might inform us of things that we're looking for or needing in life. But it led me to a point where I felt absolutely worthless. I felt like I could not... I didn't deserve anything. I didn't deserve, decent love. I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. And it led me to a relationship that was so toxic and awful with someone who was so wrong for me that led to points where they actually were physically abusive towards me. Now, I'm not saying I got beat, but I certainly had an iron swung at my head. I certainly was threatened to be stabbed as someone was holding a sharp object. I it was the case where cops were called, and weirdly enough, we were in Texas, and they called the cops, and then when the cops interviewed us, they were the one hauled away, which doesn't usually happen. So that really goes to show like how bad the situation was. And I stayed with that person for years, and I felt trapped. I felt like I couldn't get out, and not only that, I felt like I didn't deserve any better. Eventually, I was able to get a decent job, and it was out of town, and I began working on myself, and I did get out of that. But the ghosts of the past 20 years at that point didn't really disappear just because I got out of the relationship, and I thought things were getting better. But then I still wasn't making a whole lot of progress, and I was looking for answers. I first got into looking at life hacks. I was looking at productivity tips, like, okay, well, I can't get my shit together, so maybe it's because I don't use the Pomodoro technique, or maybe it's because I don't use the getting things done method, which, by the way, I do use a modified version of that, and if you struggle with task management or remembering things, I think you should read that book by David Allen. But, it still wasn't solving the root issues. And as time went on, I finally was lucky enough to come across someone who, again, has become my mentor, and I've worked with for 7 to 8 years now, who really led me to understand what trauma was all about, how it was affecting me, and working with me to process and get through that. Thank God that was the case, and I had begun taking those steps and understood it, because then in my mid-30s, the worst trauma of my life occurred. So I dealt with a bunch of stuff. I thought things were getting better, and I was fixing things, and then an absolutely massive betrayal by my wife sent me to absolute hell for 3 years. And I have been suicidal before. This was only 5-6 years ago that I was suicidal in dealing with that, because of how low it laid me. There is something that sometimes people say that I really agree with. In Dante's Inferno, there's the multiple levels of hell. The betrayers are at the very bottom level of hell, right next to Satan himself. And that's because betraying someone's trust and stabbing them in the back like that is really the worst thing you can do to a human. It completely fucks up and shatters their reality. Now, I'm not saying that betrayal can't come in many forms, so certainly it's the case that your parent could betray you if they are beating you as a child or something like that, but generally when it's something where someone who you should be able to trust, or you did trust, or anything like that, turns around and betrays that trust, it is devastating. It is absolutely devastating. And this allowed me to really look at everything, and not only did I have to go through the work that I had learned in the past prior to that, but I also had to build a new foundation for myself so that I could I looked and realized that over the past 25 years at that point, the things I thought I knew were obviously not working. So I had to really look at every area of my life, my beliefs, my values, politics, thoughts on other people, ideas or quotes that I, would kind of like or live by, or things like that. And I had to radically shift who I was and rebuild myself over these 3 years, despite being in a very tough spot, because everything in my life fell apart. Not only did my marriage obviously fall apart, my finances, my health fell apart. I was breaking out in hives. It was like some biblical shit, like Job, the story of Job, if you've ever read that. Like, everything went bad. The only thing that didn't happen is, luckily, like, my dog didn't die. He's still with me, luckily. I say all this not because I'm, again, trying to brag about my trauma or the things that I've been through. What I'm saying is that if I can go through 30 years and have, or 25 to that point, and have it culminate with this massive betrayal and have everything completely fall apart, but then be where I am now, where I'm talking to all of you about this, and I think it's safe to say, if you're looking at me right now, I probably don't appear to be a miserable, depressed person or anything like that. I'm not escaping to games. I'm using games because I want to play with friends that I love. And the games I play, especially those watching this right now, probably know who I am. You know, I get to be of service to a lot of you. I get to be of service being the merchant elder. I get to be of service being a Carnage host. It's a great feeling to me to know that I'm doing something where, like, 20, 40, 60, 100 people at any given time, depending on the event and what I'm doing, are really enjoying themselves and having a good time, right? That's actually something that's really meaningful to me. So that story is really meant to say, look, even if you went through 25 to 30 years like me of trying to figure this out, of struggling and everything, you can turn this around. It is worth it. And while the root of it is that you're going to have to address these traumas and process them, there are some practical tips that can help you along the way. Most of us are adults, right? We can't take 3 years off from work and off from life to just dive deep and just address this. Or not even 3 years, like 6 months. Let's say it only took 6 months. You still can't take 6 months off, generally speaking. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 of you can, watching this, but most people can't do that. Most people have jobs, they have relationships, they have kids at this age. A lot of people my age, I'm mid to late 30s now, but even in your mid 20s or late 20s, people have this. You can't just tell your kid to go away for 6 months. You have to do a combination where you are working on the big overarching problem, but you still need to get through the day-to-day. And I think what I try to address with clients and what I try to do myself is take a two-pronged approach where there is that big overarching, let's kind of fix this narrative, but there are also really practical tips, tricks. Again, I kind of mentioned CBT earlier. It's not like that's useless. Those things do have their place. You can use them at specific times, but I think the point is to not think that that's a long-term solution. So, if you're struggling, what are some things you can do right now, and how can you shift your thoughts? What practices can you put into place that might help you begin very quickly to turn things around? Now, again, I can tell you from about 15 years of trying everything, there are things that I'm about to talk about that I feel worked actually surprisingly well for me. They might not work for you. We're all different people, right? So if these things don't work, I would still encourage you to figure out a way that could work for you. Like, meditation's obviously one of them. That's not one of the things I'm going to talk about today, but a lot of people talk about meditation, right? That might not work for you, though, but that doesn't mean give up, right? Just keep going, keep trying, keep looking for things that do work. There's a whole bunch of things. Maybe in a future stream or video, I'll get into a giant list of things I know, and you can pick and choose whatever sounds best from you. But right now, I want to talk about 3 main things that I think were super impactful to me, and hopefully it'll help all you out too. And one of them is not jump on the game and annoy people, unfortunately. So, the first one is actually a gratitude practice. And I can tell you that I kind of rolled my eyes at this a little bit when I first heard about it. I have a friend who I've worked with, he's a coach, but I've worked with him. Prior to this, I've been a website designer and internet marketer. I have worked primarily with coaches. My story is, as I was trying to figure all this out, again, 10, 15 years ago, when I was looking at life hacks and stuff, I realized something was wrong. I was like, I think I need a coach. I happened to start working with someone who is a very popular coach, or was at the time. He is since shifted more to teaching other coaches how to coach and market themselves online, but he was a very popular life coach by the name of Tim Brownson. And then because he was so popular and a lot of other coaches looked up to him, at one point he asked me to make his website, and a lot of coaches saw that, and then that kind of became my niche. So I've worked with a lot of coaches in various disciplines. I've been able to not just do their websites or their marketing for them, but I learned a lot about them. I learned about their stories. I learned what worked. I learned about their techniques and tips and all of that kind of stuff. And this person was connected to me through that. I've worked with him professionally in a few capacities, but one thing that for a while he I guess, I don't want to say stumbled on, but came to be aware of, was the power of gratitude, and he made a site about it. I helped him with that a little bit, but I was just kind of like, all right, so you're sitting here telling me that if I just talk about the shit I'm thankful for, like, my life's gonna change? Like, that on the surface, that doesn't seem super realistic to me. It's like, to me, I often am like, I want to dive deep, right? I just sat here and talked about, like, if your thoughts and actions are all the little tree branches, like, if the root system is rotten, you got to heal that, you got to fix that, and then all of that stuff will be taken care of. So this, to me, did not sound like something that was going to be super impactful. It's like, no, that's not like really deep work. Like, I want to get into the deep work, right? But I gave it a shot because, he's like, no, really try it. And I think it is really more powerful than you would expect on the surface. And I want to be clear. I've seen some people, I've suggested this to some people, and maybe they're in like really dire straits, and it's current, and they're like, I can't find anything to be thankful for. And this might be a little bit more of a struggle if that's the case, compared to if you had some traumas or issues that are from your childhood or something like that, but day to day you're like, doing okay, but I'm struggling, but like I'm doing okay. I'm not like in it right now, right? But I would really suggest you give this a shot for like 2 weeks, because you can't just do a day, right? It's not like, it's like the gym. You can't go lift weights one day and then be like, I'm buff now, right? Or I have muscles. Like, that's not how it works. All you really got to do is spend like 5 minutes a day. You can do it right when you wake up. You can do it before, like laying in bed at night, whatever you want to do. But what happens is when you start thinking in this way, and I'll give examples in just a moment, you are starting to rewire how you look at the world and how you look at reality. I really think one of the big problems nowadays, and I think if you look at I'm not getting political on this stream, but I think if you look at the world, a lot of people are frothing at the mouth about politics and one side versus the other, and how their side's right, and they're looking for those people to fix it. And it is, I think, often born from, we're looking at the news and the media, whose job is to really sell you misery, right? Because if it bleeds, it leads. That's a classic phrase in the media, right? They are not going to start off the nightly news with a story about the girl who won a spelling bee. That's always buried like 47 minutes in. Instead, they're talking about shootings, and this politician did this, or this person cheated at this sport, or whatever else. And it is reinforcing this thing that like things are so bad, right? And we begin to have tunnel vision because we see all this stuff is coming into us, and this is what our focus is, and so that's affecting the way we view reality, right? And it kind of makes us negative, and it makes us fearful, and all of that kind of stuff. And you can really, truly begin to adjust how you view reality by shifting your focus to things that you're thankful for and grateful for. When I do this, I'm not, it's all over the place. And I guarantee you that you have something in your life, in fact, many things in your life that you can be grateful for. How do I know this? Even if you are like really struggling right now. I know this because if any of you have ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, he goes into this. He was a prisoner, a Jewish prisoner in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. His book was written based on his experiences there. I mean, he lost his family. They were killed. He survived. He was looking at what is the difference between those who survive and those who die. Obviously, really horrific stuff. And I'm not suggesting that if you read the book, he goes, I was so happy to be there, or anything like that. But he does talk about basically the last human freedom is that you have the choice about how you're going to feel or think about something, right? So even if you got punched, that you do actually have a choice to decide if you're angry about that or you don't care about it. Most of us, almost kind of default to, well, they did that and they made me feel this way. And it's like, no, they did that and you chose to feel that way. And sometimes you don't necessarily choose because it might be programmed into you at a certain level. But just kind of bear with me in that you can choose to think about things differently. Sometimes, someone could say an insult to me. I can choose to get really angry and start insulting them back, or I can choose to laugh about it and be like, all right, cool, take care, bye, and just walk away and not care, right? I have that choice. That's the last freedom I have, basically. Getting back to gratitude, if Dr. Frankl can have those experiences in a concentration camp, and he can develop logotherapy, which is, his book is 2 parts. It's basically going over his experiences and then the conclusions he drew from it, and he basically founded what's called logotherapy. I strongly recommend the book if you guys have not read this yet and you're interested at all in it. But if he can do that, then anyone watching this right now who has a device that they can watch this stream, probably lives in a first world country, probably is not in a concentration camp, thank God. You can just look around and find things to be thankful for. You can be thankful for the fact that you have reasonably clean air to breathe. I'm in Phoenix. The air quality here sucks. It's still better than like Beijing and all the smog over there, right? I can be thankful that I just have the opportunity to stream and talk about these things to all these people watching. That I have this computer. I have like 4 monitors in front of me. It's actually a pretty crazy fucking setup, if I'm being honest. I have a nice microphone, keyboard. I have a cell phone. I have food. I have a dog I love. I have a nice cozy bed. Usually when I'm doing this, I try to get down to the bare essentials even. I'll say like, thank you that I have clothes on to wear, that I have a nice bed to lay in and a soft pillow to put my head on. We take so many of these things for granted. We really do. We don't think about how blessed we are, how we live in the greatest time period in human history. I'm not saying the world's perfect. I'm not saying that there's not progress to be made or that there will never be problems. This is not a utopia. But compared to 100 years ago, first off, it's like we live in a magic fairyland compared to them. I mean, we have cell phones like with signals that go invisibly through the air, and I can talk to someone in India instantly over video, as if I'm like I can see their facial expressions and stuff. That's crazy. It's crazy. That is crazy. We are so blessed. And again, 100 years ago, like 5% of the people were rich, or owned land, or were kings or whatever, and everyone else was like a serf or a slave or something else. We all have freedom. We have so much food that we have problems with being overweight. We have so much abundance, so much entertainment, so much I can press a few buttons on my keyboard and people just bring boxes to my house with I don't even have to go shopping. Like, people just do the shopping for me now. What the hell, man? Like, and those are like the bigger things. Like, you could just really thank God for this shirt. I have a nice shirt. I have glasses so I can see cleanly, or clearly. I have it's amazing. It's amazing how much stuff I have, and that's even after consolidating a lot of stuff after the fact that I got divorced a few years ago. I still have so much stuff. I still have so many opportunities, so many advantages. You really can sit there, and if you really start to think about all the different ways you're blessed, and you repeat that process for just 1 to 2 weeks, you will start to change your reality and your perception of the world. I guarantee it. You will start looking at things in a totally different way. You will start recognizing that things really aren't that bad. As part of this, I might also suggest that some of you maybe turn the news off, right? Maybe stop watching your choice of cable political news, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. I don't give a shit what you watch. You probably should watch less of it if you watch a lot of it right now. You try to go on a detox from that stuff if you can while doing this. That's going to make switching your views and the lenses through which you see reality, it's going to be more effective if you cut out the bad shit while focusing on the good rather than trying to wrestle with both. Someone talked about sticky notes and positive affirmations. Those things do work for some people. I would say it's interesting. Positive affirmations it's not something that I'm prepared to go deep on here. The only thing I'll say about that is there is a specific way to do it where you're not necessarily causing cognitive dissonance and bringing yourself down, right? So if you're saying, like, I have $40 million in my bank account, I have $40 million in my bank account, I have $40 million in my bank account, and you're trying to recite these mantras or affirmations or things like that, sometimes that can backfire on you because you know you don't, and therefore you're lying to yourself, and the last thing you want to do is lie to yourself. So there is like a specific approach to this that I think, well, let me put it this way. I think some people can get really psyched up by saying, like, I have this, and they can attain it. And there's certainly proponents of positive affirmations. I'm just saying that it doesn't work for all people because it can backfire in that way for some people. But yeah, there you go. What about, like, I am worthy? That is actually really great, and it's something that I want to touch upon that I do as well in addition to the gratitude stuff. Often when I do this stuff, I certainly will go meditate or be mindful or have gratitude just as a practice, right? Because this stuff is an ongoing practice. It's, again, like going to the gym. You can't just go lift weights once. But if you are, like, really having a moment, right? And you want to focus on the things that you're grateful for. And as a side note, you can believe in God and say, like, thank you, God, for this, or you can do it and be secular and say, I'm just thankful for this. It doesn't matter. It works both ways. So whatever your beliefs are, it's not like you have to be one or the other or do it a certain way, right? It's just focusing on what you're blessed with. But back to my point. In the moment, if you are like really struggling with something, I've had times where things were a little tough, or I just felt like I was failing, even after all this shit, like just in the past year or two, where I had a really high bar set for myself, and it just wasn't, something wasn't working, or I was fearful it wasn't going to work out because like I wanted it to work really badly, and I didn't want to fail at it, or something like that. And again, like I said at the top of this, just because you work on trauma and healing that stuff doesn't mean that fears and anxieties ever fully go away. That's part of the human experience. You're always going to have some of that. It's just, is that coming from a place where you have really rotten beliefs and stories, or is it just because, naturally we get fearful about walking out on stage or something like that, public speaking or whatever else. There's a book I read, it's only like 70 pages, by a guy named Kamal Ravikant. If you've ever been into self-development, personal development, if you follow people like Tim Ferriss or anyone like that, you may know of Kamal, you likely know of Naval Ravikant, his brother, who is mega successful, and a super deep and wise thinker who is worth checking out. But his brother Kamal was going through a really tough time where, kind of similar to what I explained before happened in my life, like everything was failing. His finances were failing, his health was failing, and like he was really low and down. And for some reason, he like crawled out of bed practically, went over and wrote a note saying like, I make a vow to love myself, or I take an oath, whatever you want to call it. I forget the exact term he used. And then he's like, well, shit, I just made this vow. Now I need to honor this, right? What does that even mean? And what he was just repeating was, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. And I've actually used this myself to great effect. I mean, if you just sit there and say that for like 3 to 5 minutes, it will really help you reduce your anxiety. It will really help you reconnect and remember that you are worthy. You do deserve love. You are human. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay if you fail. It would be better if you succeed, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or not worthy of love if whatever it is doesn't work out, or it doesn't go perfectly or anything like that. So in addition to the gratitude, maybe tack that on at the end if you are currently struggling and looking to kind of adjust your mindset and do a little bit better. I don't know if it works for everyone. I can just say again, that's something that worked for me. Let me just catch up on chat here. Writing a positive affirmation on your bathroom mirror each night could help too. That's actually a really good suggestion. I've done something like that. You can just use like dry erase markers on your bathroom mirror, or you can use sticky notes. And I've done both actually, where it's nice to wake up in the morning and just go in, and then as you start to brush your teeth, you look up at the mirror and it's like, you've got this, or you're awesome, or anything like that. Really anything you can do to remind yourself again of how blessed you are, how you're worthy, all those things, to just begin combating the negative and intrusive thoughts, the poor beliefs, the wrong beliefs in some cases, the wrong lessons we learned, and I want to circle back about that too. If you have those things, go easy on yourself. So much of the struggles we face as adults usually come from childhood, or even like, let's say, teenage years, but we go through events in our childhood and we simply don't have adult minds to process these things. Something that happens to you at 25, you might be like, whatever. But like at 4 years old, it is everything that you just got yelled at in a certain way. In fact, I'll tell you, my very first memory was getting yelled at for something that I didn't do wrong. I was trying to listen, and someone else, I was at like preschool or whatever, someone else was messing with me as I was trying to do what the teacher, whoever, said. And I got in trouble, and they did too. I'm like, I was doing the right thing. And the lesson I took away from that was authority can't be trusted. And I carried that with me for decades, right? And that colored my perception of the world. That they can get it wrong, that they can be unfair, that they need to be, viewed suspiciously. And I certainly have a lot of that now, still being someone who has freedom as a very high value and does not. I would say I'm something like an aspiring prepper, maybe. I don't. I view big organizations and governments a little suspiciously, and I'd say books like 1984 or Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, those were all very impactful for me. But that was my very first memory, and it's something that colored my view of reality pretty much for the rest of my life. You can apply that to so many things in your childhood, about so many beliefs you have and the way you view the world and all these kinds of things. And as a 25-year-old, if I was trying to do the right thing and someone yelled at me for it, I'd be like, whoa, excuse me, I was trying to do this. Are we on the same page here? Because I thought I was doing the right thing. If I was doing the wrong thing, you can tell me. I could have had a dialogue about it. I could have addressed it like a mature adult. I would have been able to verbalize it, all those things. I could not do that as a 4-year-old. And as a 4-year-old, we are just, our brains are not fully developed. Our brains go through a process from childhood to our teenage years and then up through adulthood where different parts of it are coming online. And as a child, we don't even really have those parts of our brain online to process those things. So you're just doing whatever you can to protect yourself, right? And what happens is you take away beliefs or stories, or you learned the wrong lessons from these situations, and then you carry those with you through the entire rest of your life unless you then go back and address them. And that's kind of the work I'm talking about when I'm saying you need to deal with trauma or grief. It could be something really big, like your parents being abusive. It could be even just something really small, like a story like that, where you have to examine it and look at it as an adult and go, okay, this person probably, was wrangling 30 kids, and they look over for half a second and they see that something's going on between the two of us, and you're both in timeout because you weren't listening or whatever, right? Who knows what the situation was, but for me that was massively impactful, right? So don't beat yourself up just because you maybe learned lessons that are now weighing you down at this point. Little bit, we'll get into PTSD in a little bit, but that's actually, post-traumatic stress disorder. We're talking about trauma, so yes, I have gone into that, but I'm gonna stay on the things that are useful right now. And this is gonna be a lot of streaming over many days and weeks to come, so we'll dive more thoroughly into some of the topics that you guys are talking about. But I don't want to get too far off topic here, which I've done a little bit maybe at this point. Anyway, gratitude and also repeating I love myself. Really give that stuff a shot. That's number one. Number two, this is going to be a little difficult if you are really struggling with something now. It's going to be a little bit easier, again, if it was a past trauma that you're not in right now. And that would be really trying to work on believing that everything you go through makes you stronger and is working for you, right? And that's a tough one because it's like people go through some really horrific shit, man. And it's how could that have been for my benefit? And the answer is you could choose to not view it that way. And you could choose to say, this happened to me. How could this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? This is bullshit. Life's unfair. You can choose to do all these things. But you're going to stay where you are. Because you're going to stay in a victim mindset. So you, even if you are really, even if you're really struggling right now, just try on some level to go, there may be some way that this is for my benefit. There may be some way that I'm going to be better for this. I can tell you, when I was going through the years of absolute hell in my life, that I would never, ever, ever be even close to capable of saying, I'm thankful this is happening right now. I was not thankful it was happening. I was fucking miserable. I wanted to kill myself various times. I was having some really, really dark thoughts. Really dark thoughts. But thanks to my previous experience when I was getting out of my first really bad relationship that was abusive and all that, for some reason I always held on to hope. And in fact, I have a tattoo that says, "Look to the stars, let hope burn in your eyes." This is from my favorite song by Muse. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. And when I look at this, no matter how bad things get, just try to hold on to the hope that things can get better, because they can. You can look throughout history at some horrific tragedies, and you can see so many examples of people overcoming this and actually being better for it or thriving from it. And you may even know people in your own life who have done this. If they can do it, or it can be the case for them, it could potentially be the case for you. Right? You just have to open yourself up to the possibility that it could potentially be the case for you. You don't have to say, yes, this is going to make me stronger. You don't have to say, I am going to be I can't wait because this is so awesome that this happened to me, because I'm going to level up so much more from it. Or you don't have to be excited about it, anything like that. You just need to have that belief that this might be working in your favor in the long run. And I think it's the case, and I think people who have overcome various traumas or things like that, they will often say how much it developed them as a person, how much stronger they are, how much better they are. But not only that, how much more proud of themselves they are, how much more worthy they feel, and all those things. And despite having, decades of issues and things like that, it was then really when I was completely laid low that I had to crawl out of rock bottom. I had to completely reinvent myself. I had to adopt so many different beliefs, changes, ideas, etc. And it's not enough to just think it. You actually have to do the work too, right? And it's painful. But at this point, it's the benefit of that is after 30 years of hell, you can't fuck with me. You can't. Someone could tap me, or they can be annoying or something. I can tell them to fuck off. And there's a time, I'm not a pacifist, there's a time to show some teeth and be like, back the fuck off. But at the end of the day, there's really nothing that someone could throw at me that is truly going to fuck with me. And it's from developing a resilience and an inner strength to go through all that, to know there's really nothing that I can't handle, right? So even if I had to take a few breaths before doing a live stream for the first time, or that we have the same fears and anxieties, you become so, you can reach a point where you're so, I don't want to say good as a person as in like, look at how awesome I am. You're so okay inside as a person that you have an inner peace and an inner sanctuary that just can't be messed with. And the reason that that's really important is because if you are stable and steady and solid like that, you can be such a force for good in the world, right? If I hadn't gone through everything that I went through, I couldn't be here talking to all you right now. I wouldn't have all these people in the chat saying things, and you know, I see that there's some positive responses here, and I'm really happy to see that. And you know, even just yesterday I gave a presentation, and I know some of you watching this right now were at it, where I was talking about this very thing, about adopting a certain worldview where if you are good personally and you're taking care of yourself, you can have such a great effect on the rest of the world. And I really believe if we want to make a better world, it starts with working on ourselves and addressing these things and taking care of it. Because if you are letting trauma affect you, usually that seeps out even when you don't want it to, right? Like even if you're trying to suppress it or keep it down, it seeps out in thoughts or ways you react to situations and all this kind of stuff. And when someone does something to you that causes you trauma, it's generally because they were traumatized and that shit was seeping out and affecting you. So you're breaking cycles by doing this, right? And you are, it's not about looking to any other person or, you know, voting a certain way because they're going to change the world for the better. What we all need to start doing is taking responsibility for our shit and healing ourselves to become really confident, competent, solid people who are breaking these cycles, who are not continuing and letting the trauma that they have then spill out onto the next one and carrying that. And I don't think it even requires the entire world doing this. It's an exponential effect. Like even if 5 to 10% of people started really taking this seriously, really started listening to what I'm saying about trauma right now, thinking about it and going, actually, what he's saying is making sense. I probably need to look at this a little bit more closely and work on it, or be a little bit more serious about it. When you take care of that, it affects your inner circle, right? And you're able to start helping them more, because if you are struggling, you're really not useful to people. Like if you barely have your shit together and you can barely get through the day, I'm not saying you can't help someone cross a street or something, and that's valid and that counts, right? Like any little act of kindness is good. You should do that. Whatever level you're at, you should try to help other people. But the higher you go, the greater effect you're going to have on other people is. So what I'm preaching right now is not just that I think you should fix yourself for you. We need you to do that to make the world better. We all need this. So that was a lot, right? If you can, have some hope that it will get better, that it's going to make you stronger, and also that it may have been given to you because it's going to develop you into someone who then might make the world better. Maybe by everything I went through over the past 30 years, if I do this streaming thing and coaching thing for however long, and let's say 3 weeks from now I touch upon a subject that really just helps one person, that's amazing. Maybe I can alleviate the suffering of someone else, just that little bit, and that would really make a lot of it worth it. And if you can adopt that mindset, I think it will, again, help you adjust how you are viewing the world and the lens you're viewing it through, to where you start making better progress. So those are two things. Number one was the gratitude thing, along with the I love myself thing. Number two, really working towards believing that what you're going through is making you stronger or is working for you in some way or something like that. The third thing I want to talk about, and I really believe this is important, is develop massive integrity and be someone of phenomenal character. And that can be a real tough one, because we think based on how we feel that we're right, and we're willing to do things that we know are wrong almost as a means to an end. We go, well, I'm a good person, or I know this thing is wrong, or I know if I tell this lie or whatever that it's going to make this easier. And you really can't do that, because it's really hard to feel good about yourself when you know you're lying, right? The problem, excuse you, sorry. The problem is when you are laid low and like I was saying, you're not feeling worthy, you have all this shame and everything. You, on a certain level, because of those events, you view yourself maybe deep down as a bad person, right? But then on the surface level, as you go through the world, you go, well, I'm doing the right thing because I have these political beliefs, or I have, these ideas over here, or whatever it is, and you start to get comfortable with lying. And really, though, that just reinforces the deep down shame or dislike or feeling of unworthiness. And if we want to combat that, it would really help if going forward you are acting in such a way that it's hard for those stories and beliefs to argue how you are now. So what I mean by that is, if you start, I did this close to 2 years ago now. I took a vow where, with extremely limited exceptions, I would not lie, cheat, or steal. And that doesn't mean that I tell everyone the full truth, although, again, to be very clear, it's not about misleading people. It's just about, I don't, there are things about me that are not everyone's business, right? There are things that friends tell me that are not other people's business, or whatever else. So I don't need to fully explain every little bit of something I know and be so over the top honest about things. But you can't lie. You really can't lie. And it doesn't mean that in certain circumstances, like if someone had a surprise birthday party and they asked me, do you know if I have a surprise birthday party? I'd say no, even if I knew, because I don't want to ruin the surprise for them, right? So there's little things like that are okay, but you really want to question yourself and really not be okay with lying if you can possibly like avoid it at all costs, aside from really absolutely dire costs where someone is using maybe your integrity against you in a malicious or malevolent way to try to gain knowledge or access about something that they shouldn't have, keeping a surprise party secret, or a situation where, and this is a scenario that I often draw on, if I was in Nazi Germany and I was hiding Jews in my house and an SS officer walked by and said, do you have Jews in the house? The correct answer is no. Okay? So there are a few limited circumstances where maybe integrity is above not lying, but I would really encourage everyone, even if you don't take a vow like I did, try to start not lying. Try to be someone that has massive integrity, that does what they say, because as you do that, every day you are adding a vote for, and with every decision, you are putting a vote in for the type of person you are. And if you have these intrusive thoughts and negative beliefs in the background saying you suck, you're not worthy, this, that, the other thing, you are now building a case to argue that. And when those thoughts begin to come up and it's like, you suck, you're not worthy, it's like, no, actually, I don't suck. Like, look at what I'm doing over here, right? I think with these three things, if you are building a case for yourself through your actions, that kind of combats those negative beliefs. If you are holding on to hope that what you went through could be used to make you stronger or better and work out not just for you, but the world at large overall, if you manage to get past it, and just repeatedly reminding yourself what you're thankful for, that you're worthy, affirmations, that you love yourself, something in that realm, and also maybe removing negative influences, whether that's news, maybe that's some people around you who are just very negative that are kind of holding you back. You are kind of the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, so again, I don't want to go down that road, but it's another thing to consider. If you just start with these things, you will be making practical progress over the days and weeks ahead that will buy you the time and also, let's say, the stability and the resolve and everything else that comes with it as things will start to get better, that you can then do the deep work of really attacking trauma on a big level and hopefully resolving that. And then the end result of all this is that that stuff is resolved and those negative beliefs and stories kind of disappear. And it's amazing how just resolving a few really big traumas like changes your entire life, because often we have like these really big things that so many beliefs, so many thoughts, so many things branch out from, that when that evaporates and new beliefs and thoughts take its place, it is amazing. Like when I first started doing this work, how over the first few weeks I knew there'd be big shifts, but I didn't know how many little things as I went through the day would change, where I'd be like, I would have had a thought like this before and it's not there anymore, right? And so the end result is you get rid of so much of that shit dragging you down, but then you've also built yourself into such a great person of character who is viewing things positively. And when you're that kind of person and in that kind of mindset, you can do so much good in the world. And it will feel good, and you'll feel better, and you won't be miserable and dragged down. So it's like a win-win situation for everyone. So that's kind of the philosophy I'm preaching here. That's why I think tackling this stuff and talking about it is really important. I hope that a lot of you took something away from this, even if it was just seeing me in the flesh, for those of you who know me and decided to tune in about it. I will give another minute or two in case anyone wants to say anything in the chat, has questions or things like that. But I think this is probably a good spot for me to wrap up what I want to talk about today. I will be back tomorrow, and we'll dive into other things then. But if any of you want to actually ask any questions, go ahead. Let's see here. And I'm going to see if I missed anything too. Some say to use red lipstick. Yeah, I don't think I'd use red lipstick on my mirror, since I don't have any red lipstick. I would probably recommend the dry erase or the sticky notes if you're going to write affirmations and put them on your bathroom mirror. And also, thank you to all who tuned in and are watching this. That's really cool. Wow, 21 people. Thank you very much if you just for showing up and watching, and to all the people who have supported me in getting this started. A lot of friends who felt that this was important and thought that I had something important to say. Really appreciate everyone's support. Thank you very much. Thank you. Also, while I'm here, Uh, the general idea isn't only for me to stream and potentially connect with people, who I can help one-on-one, but if not, that I can help you, through these streams. The other thing is I did set up a Discord. You can find it, if you're watching on Twitch, in the About section. It'll just have a link to the Discord. If you found this through Discord, because I announced it to a great number of people, join. What I'm looking to do in there is create a community where it's supportive and positive, and we can talk about things that I'm discussing on this stream, or the stuff that was talked about in stream chat, where it was like, do affirmations work? If you want to just ask some basic questions, or you want to throw out, hey, this has been working for me, or just find people who are supportive. And again, going back to the idea that you are the sum of the people you spend time with, maybe if you're around other people who are adopting this mindset, then that will help you along as well, or you'll help them along, and we'll grow something really positive among the gaming community, where we are positively addressing mental health, helping people and supporting them to achieve things in their life that they want, so on and so forth. So I don't see any other things in the chat. If you do have any questions, you can DM me. Just, again, go on that Discord channel. You're going to see Everclear in there. You can just right click and hit message. You can go on my website, which is also linked below. It's evercleargamercoaching.com. There's a contact form on there. You can also see a little intro video that I recorded the other night that kind of really sums up everything in 8 minutes, if you want to go check that out as well and see a little bit more of me for some reason. Other than that, thank you all for watching. I'm going to end here, and take care.